Hi y'all, welcome and welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about one of the most famous scenarios in ethics and game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. Our main explanations and examples come from The Fundamentals of Ethics by Russ Shafer Landau and Philosophy 101 by Paul Kleinman. By the way, those two books are awesome. I use them all the time for course materials and I highly recommend both. The prisoner's dilemma is a situation that shows how the rational pursuit of self-interest can actually make everyone worse off. For a little background on the theory, as Paul Kleinman explains, this idea comes from the field of game theory, which is a branch of mathematics that studies strategic decision-making. So in 1950, mathematicians Merrill Flood and Melvin Drescher at the Rand Corporation were exploring these ideas, and Princeton professor Albert W. Tucker adapted their work into the scenario that we now call the prisoner's dilemma. Here's how it works. Two individuals who were engaged in a criminal enterprise together, let's call them Al and Bob, are arrested and placed in separate holding cells. Now, before they were arrested, Al and Bob agreed to stay silent in the event that they were apprehended. So after they are apprehended, the police don't have enough evidence to convict them on the major charge, so the police offer Al and Bob each the same deal in hopes that one or more of the two will confess. The police say, if you confess and your partner stays silent, you'll go free and your partner will get incarcerated for 6 years. If you stay silent and your partner confesses, you'll get 6 years and they will go free. If you both stay silent, you each get 2 years. If you both confess, you each get 4 years. By the way, yes, this sort of thing does happen in real-life criminal investigations and prosecutions, and no, the police can't actually make this kind of deal. It would have to be a prosecutor who makes a plea agreement. Anyway, just some details. Just to remind y'all, I used to be a criminal defense attorney, so that's how I know this. Let's move on. Here's a chart so that you can see the different potential outcomes. Russ Shafer Landau argues that for each suspect, confession is the rational choice, no matter what the other one does. If Bob stays silent, Al can go free by confessing. If Bob confesses, Al gets fewer years by confessing too. If both Al and Bob follow this line of reasoning and they both confess, they'll both end up with 4 years each, which is worse than if they had both stayed silent. Now let's take this into the real world. Both the Fundamentals of Ethics and Philosophy 101 give compelling examples of how the prisoner's dilemma shows up in everyday life. First, overfishing in the Chesapeake Bay. Russ Shafer Landau describes how the Chesapeake Bay was once one of the world's richest fisheries. Fishermen, acting rationally in their own short-term interest, tried to maximize their catch, but when everyone did that, fish populations collapsed. The self-interested reasoning is, if I fish more, I make more money right now. But the result of this is the resource was depleted and everyone ended up worse off with fewer fish to catch and sell in the long term. A second example is industrial overfishing today. Paul Kleinman updates this issue to a global scale where he talks about large commercial fishing fleets that catch fish at a faster rate than the fish can reproduce. Short-term profits soar, but the long-term survival of the fishing industry is jeopardized. So cooperation, such as setting quotas, would preserve the resource, but each individual actor has an incentive to overfish while the resource is still available. A third example is performance-enhancing drugs in professional sports. This is where we see with competitive athletics, you can imagine that a few athletes start taking performance-enhancing drugs, others feel pressured to do the same in order to stay competitive, and this cycle just escalates, increasing health risks for all of them, while these records are going to improve only marginally. If everyone agreed not to use these drugs, all athletes would be healthier, but the temptation to get an edge is what keeps that cycle going. We can also take a look at political smear campaigns. So in politics, if one candidate launches a smear campaign, the opponent might respond with attacks of their own so that they can stay in the game. The result of this is political discourse becomes toxic, public trust is eroded, and both reputations will suffer. Yet from each of these candidates' perspectives, responding in kind seems like the rational move to make in the short term. Now let's talk about the tragedy of the commons. Kleinman uses the famous commons grazing example. Multiple farmers let their cows graze on shared land because it's better than using their own, but overgrazing ruins the land for everyone. Our moral takeaway from this is that when individuals act only for immediate self-gain, they can destroy the very system they depend on. Across all of these examples, the logic is the same. What makes sense for one person in the short term can hurt everyone, including that person, in the long run. The dilemma shows the tension between individual rationality and group rationality, a theme at the heart of ethics and social cooperation. Both sources of information we discussed today, The Fundamentals of Ethics and Philosophy 101, show how the prisoner's dilemma raises deep moral questions. Sometimes protecting your own immediate interest means harming the group and eventually yourself. Understanding this helps us to think about cooperation, trust, and long-term well-being in society. So the next time you're faced with a choice between acting for your own short-term gain or working with others for a shared benefit, remember the lesson from the prisoner's dilemma. Cooperation can be the most rational choice after all. That wraps up this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day.